Hello again out there in internet land. I am the Jazz and Blues audiophile coming your way once again. But this time, I'm not going to present an album for this program. We're going to discuss in this program which is the best means of sound reproduction for hi-fi sound reproduction. Is it the vinyl 33.5 RPM record? Or is it this little thing here that never disappeared, is not gone yet, even though vinyl is experiencing a resurgence? This little thing, the CD created over 30 some years ago, is it this one or is it the vinyl record? Now, before we get into this topic of which is the most reliable medium for hi-fi sound reproduction and preservation, I would say, we have to realize one thing. First of all, I want to say off the bat, I am not against vinyl records. I'm not an anti-vinyl person. I have collected vinyl records for a long part of my life. In the beginning, before this thing was ever invented, I used to own a fairly large vinyl record collection, and I got rid of it a couple of years back and gave it to one of my friends who is a vinyl-only listener. He just doesn't listen to CDs, doesn't own a CD player, rejected CDs from the start when they came out. So he only listens to vinyl. So I gave him my whole collection, my whole jazz and blues collection went to him, even though he doesn't even appreciate jazz and blues. Now, is that crazy or what? But anyway, the question we must ask ourselves, first of all, is what is the goal that we're trying to achieve when we come home on our different sound systems and we listen to music in a certain format? Now, there's many formats out there. It could be the vinyl record, which the two main formats, of course, are the vinyl record and the CD. Now, there's all these other digital formats, which are lossless audio files, MP3, which are lossy files, not the same thing. But when we're talking about high quality formats, we can include the lossless audio formats such as WAV or FLAC or APE files or and the like. That's also very high quality music reproduction files. Now, and they're all part of the digital revolution brought upon by this little thing here. So they all fall into pretty much the digital medium, even though they don't necessarily have to be on CD. When you're listening to a FLAC file, you can transfer it to CD, or you can transfer it to a DVD, or you can transfer it to a USB stick, and all kinds of things like that. But it's still digital. So what's better, digital or analog vinyl? Well, it depends. CDs don't always sound better. It's true. A lot of CDs sound like crap. They sound horrible when you compare them to their vinyl counterpart. And sometimes the vinyl comes out sounding a lot better, and it's not even hard to hear the difference. You just pick it up right away. You say, my God, that record sounds a lot better than the CD transfer I have. Now, is it possible? Is the reverse also possible? Absolutely. There's some CDs that'll put a lot of records to shame because they reproduce the sound of that recording much better, much closer to the actual original master tape than the record can. Now, there are some objective facts about both mediums that need to be said. And this is what I'm going to try to share in this little video, because I've found out by after listening to several people, air their views on this all over the internet, and weigh in on the debate of CD versus vinyl. What was lacking, in my sense, is some objective facts, some undisputable objective facts. Because we all know that when we listen with our ears, listening is somewhat subjective. I can prefer a certain type of sound, and you can prefer a certain other type of sound. Some people like more bass in their music, no matter what kind of music they listen to. I listen to jazz most of the time. And some people like their jazz very bassy. I don't like my jazz too bassy. I want to have, a lot of mid-range and high-end in my jazz. I find that's what sounds usually better. It's more satisfying to my ears. But that doesn't mean that another person will find it as much satisfying. Some person might like the lower tones to be more emphasized. So that kind of listening, that preference in listening, that is very subjective. So That varies, and it varies from person to person, and we can't really debate about that because that's subject to choice, personal preference. But what we can establish is, yes, most people can tell when they're listening to something that's of inferior quality. If we listen to an A and a B comparison between two recordings of the same product, the same artist, and one is better done, is better reproduced than the other one, usually also we're able to tell, unless the differences are so minute that you need to concentrate like a maniac to see a difference. Most people can tell a difference if the difference is fairly obvious. They can say, oh, this one sounds better, has better dynamics, better dynamic range, better high frequencies, better lows than this other one here. And sometimes it could be the compact disc that sounds better, or sometimes it could be the vinyl disc that sounds better. It depends. But that usually, that's not as subjective. It's pretty much objective. No matter what sound you prefer, you can usually tell the difference between bad and better, or good and very good. But what are some of the major factors that come into play that I find are not mentioned enough in this debate is the problems inherent to human beings when transferring audio recordings. Why is that not emphasized? I don't know. But the problem, and what I mean by that problem inherent to a human being when transferring, is that some recording engineers out there that are responsible for transferring recordings, master tapes, onto a CD medium or onto a vinyl medium do a very poor job of doing so in their mastering process, in their transferring process. They don't take the time to listen properly to the music and to the outcome of the finished product once it's transferred to the medium of choice. And so they do excuse the language, a shitty job, and you get a shitty sound at the end. So there's that factor. We must never forget that some engineers there don't give a crap. They don't care about what they're transferring as long as they've done their day's work, and they cash in their check and goodbye, we'll see you tomorrow. You have to really love the music and love what you're doing and love producing quality sounding recordings in order to take the time that's necessary, I think, to do a good job. And that's the truth in any kind of job. Whether you're working in the auto sector, whether you're working in plumbing, whether you're a dentist, whatever your profession may be, you have to want to do quality work and take the time that it takes to do a good quality product, to produce good quality work. And that's the same in any kind of trade. And the sound engineers are no different. They're human beings. Some of them, they care, and some of them, well, they don't give a damn. Or they give less of a damn. So that is a factor that plays in. So a lot of times when people are transferring, it's not the medium, it's not because of this thing, it's because the engineer at the other end didn't care. He just transferred it to this without taking proper care that he was transferring to a CD format and that it needed a special kind of mastering in order to sound its best. Well, that's not the problem, again, of the medium. It's the problem of the human being behind the transfer. So there's that, and that's the same thing for vinyl also. A lot of engineers take their time, they do a good job on vinyl, or some of them don't. They don't take their time and they don't do a good vinyl transfer. So that's problems that we have no control over, because I can't go into a recording studio or a big production company like Columbia Records or RCA or whatever and tell the guy, hey, take your time. I want a good product. When you're going to transfer this nice jazz record that I really like, I want the best possible sound. So you take the time to tweak that stuff and master it properly before you put it onto the CD that I'm going to buy. Well, I have no say in that. There's nothing I can do, and neither can you. So we just have to rely on the company that they're going to put it in the hands of an engineer that cares and is going to take the time to produce a quality hi-fi product. And that, unfortunately, is not always the case, because you must remember, again, something a lot of people forget: the music is not just the industry out there. The music industry, well, music is a business. It's a big business, and it has to make money. and they like to make money fast. And when you want to make money fast, you don't necessarily take the time to produce quality products. You want to speed it up so you get as much out there, sell as quickly as possible, and make as much money as possible. So that's factors, those are human factors we have no control over. But then there's problems inherent to the medium. And here I'm going to talk about problems that are inherent to vinyl. And this is why I finally, in the final stage, I will take sides on the side of the CD medium as being the most reliable medium, and the best medium for great sounding hi-fi reproduction. And I will tell you why. And these are objective reasons that I don't think can be denied. So if you think you have an objection, I would like to hear from you in the comments section down below this video. You scroll down at the bottom of this video and you can comment. You can write to me and say, I'm not in agreement with you over this, and here's why. And also, if you like these kinds of videos, if you like these kinds of talks, and you like my presentation of some great jazz and blues albums, well, don't forget to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button at the bottom of your page, or at the top, or wherever it may be. I forget. But anyway, don't forget to subscribe so you'll get the new videos as they come out. I produce at least one video a week. Now, here we are. Here's the problems that are inherent to vinyl discs. And before I start listing them, I would like to make one statement. If you own, let's say we're talking about a recording done during the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, in the era of analog, and that was put out on a record because there was no other medium, either records or tapes at the time. If you own an original copy, an original issue of the year that the recording came out. Let's say the recording was done in 1965 and you own the 1965 issue of it on a record, on a vinyl record, you probably own the best sounding copy that there ever will be out there. No matter how many reissues they make out on these CDs, I doubt that they'll be able to match the sound quality of your original vinyl, 1965 vinyl issue. Why is that? I'll tell you why. Because master tapes, and this must not be forgotten, master tapes, after being played over and over and over, just like a record, they do deteriorate over time. They lose oxide. That's why your heads on your tape decks, remember those who still have tape decks, I used to have tape decks back in the past, that's why you have to clean your heads regularly. Why? Because there's oxide on them. And where does that oxide come from? It comes from the tape. It wears off of the tape because the tape wears, there's a tape usage, and there's a tape wear and tear after a certain number of plays. And after a certain number of plays, yes, this alters the sound. The sound starts to deteriorate just a little bit. I don't know how many how many plays it takes, but the sound does start to deteriorate after a certain number of repeated plays, even of a master tape. So, if you own an original issue of a recording of 1965, say recording, you own the original record, well, you've got the best sound. Why? Because the tape was fresh. It hadn't been played 125,000 times yet. So when it was played and transferred to the master stamper for your record, you're getting, the best quality usually because it was fresh. It wasn't used yet. It was relatively new. The tape had not had the time to start losing some of its dynamic qualities over time. So usually if you own an original issue on vinyl, there's no disputing. I've heard several like that, and the sound on the vinyl was definitely better than much later year remasters on CD. That's the first thing. I want to clear that up. But now, let's get to the imperfections of vinyl. The problems that are absolutely objectively inherent to vinyl records and vinyl record reproduction of sound on vinyl records. And here they are. First of all, the first thing, speed fluctuation. Your 33.5 RPM or your 45 RPM vinyl record has to revolve at exactly 33.5 RPMs, revolutions per minute, on your turntable. If it slows down, if, say, your turntable is losing time because your belt starts being worn, and you haven't noticed it, but you should have replaced your belt, and you've lost 2 or 3 seconds, so your music plays 2 or 3 seconds slower, well, that makes a huge difference in the sound reproduction because it creates a pitch fluctuation. It changes the pitch of the playback, and when you change the pitch of the playback, the sound is automatically altered. It's not quite the same as the original master tape. Now, I know this firsthand. I experimented this firsthand, and you can make the experiment. Those who don't believe me, and I know a lot of people don't believe me. What I did when I was a huge vinyl record collector, I had a very good quality cassette deck. And what I used to do is when I came home with a brand new record, I used to put the record on the turntable. It's brand spanking new, never been played. And the first time I played it, I would record it on a cassette. Then I would put this cassette away, and I would just play the record over and over and over and over and over. And I remember a special favorite record of mine, favorite jazz record, that must have played that record over 60 or 70 times in a row. Every time I come back from school and do my homework, this record would be playing in the background while I was doing my homework. And it must have played 50, 60, 70, 80 times, side A, side B, all the time. Side A, side B, at least once every day. And after playing it over and over like that, after a couple of months, I decided, hey, why don't I pull out the cassette that I made of this when I first bought it and listen to it? So I pulled out the cassette and played it, and whoa, I had a shock. I had a shock because I realized that my record, the wear of the stylus constantly rolling in the groove, had altered the sound slowly and almost unperceptible to my ear. But when I went back to the original way that was when I first bought it, brand spanking new, and I recorded and I played that tape back, I could tell the huge difference and the huge deterioration that had occurred in the period of time that I've played this record over and over and over. So that's an experiment you can make, and I encourage you, either with a tape deck or if you can record onto a Windows Media Audio or a FLAC format or whatever, or even MP3 for that matter, you'll see the deterioration of the wear and tear of playing over and over a record. You'll see there is a deterioration. So in any case, this is a deterioration that occurs. Why? Because, again, this is an inherent problem to vinyl records. Since it's there's a physical contact between a stylus, no matter how good your stylus, how good your diamond stylus may be. It could be the best in the world. It could be worth $3,000, your diamond stylus. Your diamond stylus is a hard substance that comes into contact with another rigid and hard substance, which is called a vinyl disc. And both have contact together, and the stylus just rolls around your record on and on and on, and it creates a friction. And it's from this friction that the sound is decoded, from this vibration, this friction between the two materials. And as anybody knows, it's a law of physics. It's undeniable. Friction uses up the materials. Even though, however slightly you might use them, they do get used in the long run. It's the same thing as when I leave with my car and I roll on my tires. Every time I come back, my tire is a little bit more worn and used than before I left home, because it has come into contact with the asphalt, and both have been in friction together, in contact together. It uses up. Same thing with a stylus and a record. So it uses your groove, and ultimately after 100 plays, 50 plays, 100 plays, whatever it may be, your sound starts to alter. But it's imperceptible if you don't have anything to compare it with, to its original status when you first bought it. But it has changed. It has played a trick on you, and your sound is not exactly the same as it was when it was new. Second thing, that's a problem with vinyl. is it has to be read by a specific cartridge and stylus. And if you change your stylus, or you change the cartridge, or you change both interfere with the way that your record is going to sound. Some styluses, I remember, some styluses, I used to have records, some styluses used to bring out more of the treble of the recording. Others brought out more of the bass. Other stylus and cartridges brought out more of the mid-range. So my question is, if different styluses and cartridges alter the sound that you'll be getting from the record, that you'll be extracting from the record, which sound is the right one? Which sound is the one that is closest to the original master tape recording? We don't know. Because every time you change your cartridge or stylus, you change the kind of sound that you're going to be getting from your vinyl record. So again, that's a problem. You don't know if you're hearing the actual corresponding sound to the original master, because you're altering the sound with these changes. The other thing you had to do, and you still have to do with a turntable, is you have to make sure that your overhang adjustment is perfect. What is the overhang adjustment? For those who don't know, the vinyl record, since it is a cylinder, has to be read with the stylus going perfectly at the center of the disc, going from center right down to the middle, and it must be perfectly positioned in the center. If it's not perfectly positioned in the center, with the perfect center of your disc, well, it will not be reading in the way it is supposed to, and it's going to cause distortion to your sound. You'll not be getting the sound the way it was intended. Another thing with records, static build-up and cleaning. You have to clean them up. There's static that builds up on them. That can come out in your recording. That can be picked up by your stylus when you're reproducing them. It's another problem that you have to constantly look out for. Then there's the pickup background sound. What I call the pickup background sound is that distinctive vinyl sound that I personally enjoy. I think it sounds good. I like that sound. It's the needle drop. You know, when the needle drops, the stylus drops on the record, and let's say the music doesn't start right away, you hear this sort of, this background pickup sound, I call it. That's the sound of the record, of the actual stylus picking up the record from the friction of the movement and picking up the sound from the grooves. And before the music starts, you'll hear that background sound that's inherent to a record. No matter how quiet your vinyl may be, there's always a little bit of this pickup sound that I call, that's coming from the stylus, picking up the sound and amplifying it and sending it to your amplifier. So is there some of that on the master tape? No, because master tape is electromagnetic. There's no pickup sound. So that's something that's added to the vinyl sound, which I don't find distasteful. I like that sound. It doesn't bother me, but it's something that ultimately should not be there, objectively. Then there's the stereo bleeding on vinyl. What do I mean by stereo bleeding? Well, if you pan your left and right, either all the way to the left or either all the way to the right on your amplifier, you will sometimes hear a little bit of the sound that's coming out of the right track of the groove, or the left track of the groove if you pan all the way to the right. What is that? It's called stereo bleeding. It means that the record cannot separate as well the sound and isolate them, because your stylus is so close to the other side of the wall of the groove, the left channel, the stereo channel, or the right channel, whichever it may be. It's so close that it picks up a little bit of the sound that should be coming out only on the left or only on the right. That's stereo bleeding. Call that stereo bleeding. That's another inherent problem to vinyl that cannot be fully eliminated. Then there's also the fact that distortion in sound increases as your stylus nears the end of the record, of the vinyl disc, because the end of your vinyl disc is smaller. It's getting smaller at the end of your vinyl disc. So the stylus has a harder time tracking when it gets close to the middle. And so that creates more distortion in your sound. It's another imperfection of vinyl that's inherent to vinyl. You can't eliminate it. Then finally, there's the dynamic range of vinyl records. The dynamic range of a vinyl record is about 70 dB. The dynamic range of a CD is 90 to 100 dB. The channel separation of a vinyl disc is about 30 dB. The channel separation in a CD is a whopping 90 dB. And there's no stereo bleeding in a compact disc. So in the end, the compact disc does not have all these inherent problems and sounds much closer to what the magnetic tape would sound like if you were listening to the actual master magnetic recording of the recording you're listening to. Again, it will sound closer to the original magnetic tape only if it's well transferred, it has been well mastered. And there'll be another program. I will do another program just on the mastering process at what it entails and why some mastering is very poorly done, even by renowned audiophile record companies such as Mophie, who have made some horrible masterings of certain recordings, and then they promote it as being, hey, it's a Mophie, it's one of the best recordings, the best sound you could ever get out there. Well, not really, not always true. And I'll tell you why, because mastering from the original analog tapes, what does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about that in a completely different program. But in the meantime, I'm going to leave you on this note. Don't forget to comment. Don't forget to subscribe down below. Until next time, I'm the Jazz and Blues Audiophile. And remember, jazz on.